What's up, guys? For anyone new to the channel, I'm AsgardsChamp, welcome. For any returning viewers, again, welcome back. It's a little bit of a different video from me today, so I've been recently getting back into the miniature painting and wargaming hobby, and I kind of decided that all of you need to see it as well. But no, seriously, if anyone's actually considering getting into the hobby for the first time or returning to the hobby like me, this is the video for you. I kind of just wanted to show what it took for me to get back into it, what I needed to, sort of buy, what models I needed, that kind of thing. For anyone who doesn't actually know what miniature wargaming or painting is, Google Warhammer, you'll see. So in this video, I'm going to kind of show you what I had to go out and buy in order to get back into the hobby. Also, what I kind of already had lying around as well that was useful. The stupid amount of new miniatures that I bought completely unnecessarily, and then also the process I went through of going through and painting my first unit of troops, or rather one model out of that unit, but I'm going to paint the rest. After having 5-6 years away from the hobby, if not more than that actually. But before we get into all that though, guys, just a polite reminder to smash your Warhammer into that like button if you enjoy the video, and make sure you hit the subscribe button as well if you want to see more content like this. I am planning on releasing more kind of hobby content. It's not something I've been doing, but it is something I want to get into. So if I get enough support from everybody, I'll continue doing it. So I used to collect Warhammer way back when I was younger, from being a little kid, and then I stopped for a while and got back into it maybe 5-6 years ago. As a result of that, I still got a bunch of paints, brushes, tools, etc., which have been lying dormant in a box somewhere unknown to me for the last 5 or 6 years. So I dug it out, unpacked it to see if I needed to buy anything to get going, and to my surprise, a lot of the paints were still usable. The tools that I had were all looking okay, and I still had a brush or two which looked pretty usable, so that was a bit of a success in my eyes because I didn't have to buy anything new. There was, however, an itch that I needed to scratch. So I don't know about you guys, but whenever I get into a new hobby or back into a hobby, as is the case here, I just have to buy things. It's a problem, and one that I'm sure many of you can relate to. But I ended up going onto Amazon, bought some new brushes and also a set of Vallejo paints, which I'd heard so much about from my interweb browsing. So I even had a bunch of old models which I'd not painted, so I'm thinking I'm set for a long time here. These guys are going to take me a while to paint. I don't need to buy any new models, I can make videos on these guys. But then also I ended up in Games Workshop and bought the Dominion box set and some more Games Workshop paints, and also maybe went online and bought a cheap wet palette, a model holder, and a set of little shelves for my paints. All for absolutely no reason, didn't need any of it really. I set about building up the models, unfortunately did so without the foresight to record myself doing it. At this point I wasn't too sure whether I was going to be making a video about it, and yeah, I did kind of forget to record it. Anyway, over the course of about a week, spending my evenings after work scraping away mould lines and filling gaps, badly I must say, I finished, and the end result is what you see here on the video. So I really like the new push fit models. I don't think these were a thing when I used to be part of the hobby, 5, 6, 7 years ago, however long it was. But they do have some drawbacks, which is what I found. And it's things such as this cloak, which doesn't line up at all. This was on a few of the models actually. Or this section of fur here that you can see. I'm sure with a bit of green stuff and some perseverance, I could get these gaps filled, smoothed over and whatnot. And maybe I'll do that before I actually paint these particular models, we'll see. So with everything built, I moved on to basing. I used a very simple PVA glue mix with some sand, and then used some super glue afterwards to kind of seal everything up. Note to myself though, try not to inhale the fumes too much from cheap super glue. I had a headache and a sore throat for a couple of days after this, and it wasn't nice. So be safe, kids, and definitely read the safety instructions on these things. It is actually very important. Now onto the fun bit. So I chose to paint the Stormcast Eternals first, and that's just because I had a bit of a cool idea in my mind for a colour scheme and the way that I wanted to paint them. I got started by painting one of the spare shields that was left over from the building of the models, and did that for a little test just to see if I'd actually like how it looks once it was on a mini, and also to get an idea of kind of the recipe that I would follow with the rest of the troops. So here's the result, and yeah, I was kind of digging it, I kind of liked it. So I wanted to keep some of the gold in there, just because Stormcast Eternal, but also I really don't like the full gold armour, so I wanted to try something a little bit different, but also keeping the gold in there somewhat to some degree. So I'll be painting the full squad, but for the sake of this video, obviously I'm just going to show painting one model. It'd be too much to show me painting all 10 of these Vindicators, but of course it's going to be the same process for all of the others as well. So starting with a black undercoat from a spray can, I thought I would try my hand at a zenithal highlight, also using a spray can. So in the end it was mostly pointless, as I didn't actually end up following the lighting pattern that it revealed to me, but it looks fucking cool, so I'll be doing this all the time from now on, I think. So from there I got to work on the base coat, using some leather brown by Vallejo, and got it on all the bits of the main armour plates, leaving just the trim. So the coverage was okay, but it definitely needed a couple of more coats. So after what I think was 3 coats in total, this was the result, and I was pretty happy to move on from here. So then using a bit of Carrick Stone by GW, or Citadel paints should I say, I then went over the vast majority of the armour plates again, leaving only the deepest recesses or areas that I thought should be left darker in shadow and that kind of thing. Again, this needed more than 1 coat, and here's the result after what I think was about 2 coats this time, with a few touch-ups here and there as well. So now for the next coat, I mixed up some Vallejo Bone White and Dead White at about a 50-50 mix, and again laid this over the previous coat of Carrick Stone. There's a couple of things to note here actually. First of all, this layer was probably way too much of a jump up from the previous one in terms of the value, the lighting. I think the mistake I made here was starting a base coat that was far too dark for where I wanted this to end up, which was white essentially. I don't know, I mean, maybe correct me in the comments if I'm wrong there, but I do think it was probably a bit too dark to begin with. The next thing is that the Vallejo paints, or at least the Bone White and the Dead White, they were much thinner than the Citadel paints, which is the only thing I've ever really used before to paint with. And as a result, I watered it down a bit too much, and I think the paint just started to kind of separate, leaving the paint looking a bit chalky. And I think that's something that kind of happens with the lighter colour paints anyway. So that's definitely something I'll be making note of in the future. So I wasn't really too happy with the way that this last coat of paint looked. So in my infinite wisdom, I decided to mix up a wash of my own, try to balance out the values a little bit. So I took the leather brown, mixed it with a bit of Abaddon black, and thinned it down with a bunch of water. Again, I probably thinned this wash far too much, and ended up with a really grainy looking wash in the end after it had dried. It also had no surface tension while I was applying it, and it just ran to the lowest point of the model that it could find. It's left me with much sadness, but I persevered. So going back to my 50-50 mix of Bone White and Dead White, I went about layering back up from this kind of dulled down armour after the wash had been applied. Tried to keep the layers thin here intentionally, even though I knew it was going to be a little bit chalky, but I did this in certain areas to try and keep kind of a bit of a gradient going from that darker area to the lighter area. It didn't work as well as I'd liked, but I've never really tried glazing or anything like that before, so it's something that I'm going to have to practice, I think. So after these 3 coats though, I was pretty happy with the result in the end. So for the final highlights, I used Dead White again just on its own this time. I used this to try and touch up the most raised areas of the armour, or the areas that I felt the light would be hitting the most. Again, just following my kind of mental memory of what the zenithal highlight had kind of revealed, but nothing kind of more than that really. It ended up being quite subtle, but I feel this helped the armour to read as white armour, which was my intention, rather than it being bone coloured. Maybe it's just me, I seem to get that when I look at the model when it's in my hand on the video. I don't know if that comes across as much, but it definitely reads as white to me at least. So next on the list was the armour trim. So first of all, I used some Abaddon Black just to base coat all of the areas of armour trim, just to allow the next coat to go on a little bit easier. By this point, I'd kind of realised that the zenithal highlight had been forgotten about, and so I just thought it's probably best to just cover it up. I do plan to make use of the zenithal highlights that I applied to the rest of the unit when I come to paint those guys. Maybe I'll take photos of them so I can try and recreate the pattern of light or something like that. We'll see when we get to it. So once base coated again, I mixed up a 50-50 mix of shining gold and Abaddon Black for the base coat of all the trim. So this is something I used to do in days of old, but what I'll do is I'll kind of mix black paint into my initial base coat of any true metallic paint. I feel like this helps with coverage and also allows you to then go back and just highlight the areas that would be, you know, really shiny or worn, like the edges and raised areas. I feel that it gives it a bit of visual interest to the metals. I know using washes is kind of the done thing for true metallics, but I don't really like using them on metallic paints. I guess it's just personal preference. So using some ever so slightly thinned down shining gold and then go over all the raised areas, just leaving the areas where I feel that the shadows would be, so you know, we leave that darkened down shining gold in those areas. Then to add some highlights to the armor trim, I used Vallejo polished gold, and again, just touched all the raised areas, trying not to use this kind of in excess, just wanted it to give a little shine to some of the more prominent areas of the armor trim. So for the scales on the skirts that the Stormcast wear, I tried to apply the highlights in kind of a thin band going down the skirt as opposed to on every single scale, just to kind of try and mimic how the light would reflect off it in real life. How well this turned out, I'm not too sure. It's very subtle and maybe more visible when I'm actually holding the model in my hand and looking at it rather than, again, it getting captured on the video when you zoomed in like this. It's difficult sometimes to kind of see or picture what the actual model looks like. The remaining bits to be painted on the model then was all the leather bits, the metallics on the spear and the grip. For the leather, I began with a darkened down Vallejo leather brown, and then tried to kind of scratch on bits of worn leather using character stone. This is an area I'm definitely going to need to work on as it came out pretty terrible in my opinion. I was leaving far too much paint on the brush, not getting it to the consistency it needed to be just to flow off the brush properly. Something for me to work on in the future, I guess, and that is kind of the purpose of doing this. You know, find out the areas that I need to work on, and then that's going to be the next thing I do. I base coated the cloth between the armour plates and the grip of both the short sword on the Stormcast hip and the spear that they're carrying, with a mix of Vallejo leather brown and bloody red. And then mixed up another wash, properly this time, using leather brown and Abaddon black, and applied it to all of these areas. Then using just the bloody red, I dry brushed it onto the weapon grips and applied a highlight to the cloth areas. I wasn't too happy with the results for this for a couple of reasons. First of all, the base coat and wash used for the grips wasn't dark enough, so the dry brushing wasn't really very apparent. Secondly, the bloody red paint dries very glossy, which doesn't fit for cloth. I may have to amend this recipe for the rest of the models in the future in the unit. I then used the same method as I did previously with gold trim on the armour to paint the metallic parts of the spear. So popping off the arms, which is another benefit of these push fit models, which I like. I then used a wet blend of Calthan Brown, Thondia Brown, and Deathguard Green. Don't know if that's how you pronounce those browns, but anyway. Use those on the base of the model in a bit of a wet blend. So the idea here was to give the base a bit of a swampy look to keep it on theme with the Dominion box set. Then took a bit of Agrax Earthshade, which I wish I had when I was mixing my own washes for the armour. I actually nipped out to the Warhammer shop to grab this, particularly for this base. But yeah, this was kind of after I'd already painted the model, never mind. But yeah, applied this kind of to the base, tried to concentrate this in areas that I wanted to look a bit more muddy, so towards kind of the centre of the base and so on. I then took some of the Calthan Brown and Deathguard Green again, and began to dry brush these colours onto the base. Again, trying to get a bit of a mix of the two. I feel like the result was okay, but the base still didn't feel muddy and boggy like you would expect from a swamp. So next I took some of that Thondia Brown, mixed it in with a bit of PVA glue. Now I'd not tested this on anything, so I was a bit worried that this wasn't going to end up looking good in the end, but it turned out okay, so it's fine. But what I did was I used that mix, found where the lowest parts of the base were, so kind of where the stand hadn't stuck in properly, so you know, little recesses in the base, and I applied the PVA mix to these areas, adding a bit more pure PVA glue in a few areas to let it, well, kind of just give it a bit of visual interest, hopefully. I wasn't too sure how this was going to work, but then I left that to dry overnight. Here's the result, and I was actually pretty happy with how it turned out in the end. It kind of looked like mud, which was what I wanted, and it looks kind of like the soil or the sand was wet. The last thing to do here was then to add a grass tuft, because it wouldn't be a mini soldier's base if it didn't have at least one grass tuft, right? So there you have it, guys. Here's the finished model with the base all cleaned up and the arms reattached. Overall, I was actually quite happy with how this turned out, given that I've had such a long time away from the hobby, and even when I was actually, you know, into the hobby before, didn't really take the painting very seriously. I always tried to just get the models painted up as quick as possible so I could play with them. It's definitely shown me areas where I need to improve, which was kind of the purpose of this exercise, I guess. And for much of the remainder of the models in the Dominion box set, I'm going to be attempting to improve as much as possible, try new techniques and that kind of thing. So I'm not expecting them to turn out the best models I've ever painted, but hopefully by the end of it I should be a better painter than I was right now. So anyway, don't forget to follow me on Instagram, where I'll be posting pictures of all the minis that I paint in between now and the next video. I'll throw up some work in progress photos as I go, and I'll also let you guys know whenever I release new hobby videos. I'm going to do that on my Twitter as well, so Twitter and Instagram. If you want to give me follows over there, it's always going to be greatly appreciated. So if you made it this far through the video, guys, thank you very much for watching. Don't forget to hit that like button and subscribe and all that good stuff if you enjoyed the video. Watch out for more upcoming in the future, and if this is the kind of content that you want to see, let me know in the comments, and I'll be sure to put a bit of priority on making some more. With that all said, guys, thank you again for watching, and I'll see you on the next one.